Let's talk about a recent character of yours, Tom Parker, because he was different than a lot of characters you played in the sense that he was not a nice guy, right? I mean, he was not an easy person to like. There's certainly elements about him that we are sympathetic towards, and he's complex. But I couldn't help but walking away from that film feeling like he really screwed over Elvis, that he really kind of ruined his life. I mean, forcing him to perform in Las Vegas for 7 years in a row. But aside from that, before we talk about the complexity of who he was,
there's a lot to unpack there. Yeah,
help me understand how you become that character. So Baz Luhrmann says, "I want you as Tom Parker." This is a guy who is like Dutch, but he kind of hid that. He pretended like he was sort of a Southern honorary colonel. All these weird things. He hid his past. How did you sort of build the architecture for me about how Tom Hanks then transforms into this character that becomes convincing for a viewer?
I was very lucky because I had no idea what Colonel Tom Parker looked like. I had no idea what he sounded like. I had the same sense that, Colonel Tom Parker, he must have been a foghorn and leghorn kind of guy. Well, let me tell you here, son, I'm not going to tell you what you're going to do right now. And I had heard stories from my makeup man, Danny Strepek, who did Elvis for 4 movies, including Viva Las Vegas. And the first thing I ever heard about Colonel Tom Parker, he was just a low-class carny. That's all he was. He'd cheat you out of a quarter, that kind of thing. That's what I'd heard, but I did not know what he looked like. And when I did see what he looked like, I asked Baz Luhrmann, "Why do you want me?" This is a heavy-set, balding man with a hawk-like nose, with this weird accent that no one can actually place. And so my questions was, "Okay, boss, let's collaborate. What are you going for here? Are you going for the physical look?" And he said, oh, yes. So we're talking about a substantial amount of prosthetics in order to make me look like Colonel Tom Parker. He says, "Oh, yes. I said, okay. Now, I had just played Falstaff in a production of Henry IV here in Los Angeles. Because the other thing is, okay, so that's what you're going for as far as look. And I'm going to assume the same thing is going to voice, because I've received commands from directors. Oh, you're going to do a dialect. That's okay. All right. Very good. Stephen on Catch Me If You Can, he says, I want Carl Hanratty to be from Boston. I said, okay. All right. That's a tough one to get, but I started studying. Okay. So then after that, it's like, and why are you, Mr. Baz Luhrmann, what are you trying to crack here with an examination of the Elvis story? Because the myth has been done to death.
Right.
The myth has become accepted as the truth. And he says, exactly. As far as Colonel Tom Parker is concerned, he said, without a doubt, there would have been no Elvis Presley without Colonel Tom Parker.
No, right. That's clear.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
The other side of it is, there would have been no Colonel Tom Parker without Elvis Presley. And I said, okay, now you're talking about the ego of a man. Now you're talking about a man who is in this for 2 things, the power of running the show and the delight of screwing the rubes. That's what we discovered. He was a carny, meaning that the carnival comes to the small town out on the outskirts. You put up the lights, you put up the Ferris wheels, you put up the tents. Those people are going to come. They cannot help themselves. And your job is to give them the greatest night of their lives, one thrill after another, one amazing moment after another, one delight after another, and also take them for every dime you can. And that twin delight is what comes at. Colonel Tom Parker's favorite movie was Nightmare Alley. He loved the old, who was it that starred in Nightmare Alley? Tyrone Power's Nightmare Alley. That was just most recently remade by Guillermo del Toro. He loved it because that was how they took the rubes. They're saying for 25 cents they provided you with a nickel's worth of entertainment. All right. So you start studying that around, and there's a ton of stuff about the background. Yeah, he was from Holland. He got into the carny business as a very young man over there. His desire was to run Barnum and Bailey's Big Top Circus. That's what his dream. He jumped ship once and stayed, and then went back. And then when he came back again, probably for scurrilous reasons, not just dodging his past, but perhaps the law. No one knows for sure. And then adopting a whole, he called himself Tom Parker. And then one day he was awarded an honorary colonel, made an honorary Kentucky colonel by, the mayor of, Knoxville, Tennessee, or something like that, or someplace in Kentucky. And so then he adopted Colonel Tom Parker. That's how and he still had that crazy, the odd voice, but, Colonel Tom Parker. Now, here's where it ends up going south. Rita knows Priscilla Presley from Women's Cancers Organizations, and they happen to run into each other in a restaurant here in L.A. And Rita, hey, Priscilla. Oh, Tom, we're so excited that, Tom's going to be doing the Baz movie about my husband, Yeah. Well, yeah. Would you like to come up? Come up and we'll have dinner and we'll talk about it.
Wow.
And so not only did Priscilla come up, but Jerry Schilling, who was a member of the original Memphis Mafia, who knew Elvis from high school touch football games, back in Memphis. They came up, and I said, we were just beginning the process. And I said, oh, well, please, give me a great horror story about Colonel Tom Parker.
Yeah.
And they looked at me and they said, we don't have any horror stories about Colonel Tom Parker.
Huh.
And I said,
yeah.
Look, you don't have to be nice, don't worry about it. I said, no, Colonel Tom Parker was a lovely man who was a delight to be around, who showed nothing but the greatest respect for my husband. Huh. And my husband would not have become what he did without Colonel Tom Parker. Jerry Schilling said, I wish he was still alive today so I could talk to him on the phone once a week.
Wow.
He took care of Priscilla Presley long after the divorce. He called her every Sunday and said, how are you doing? How's your daughter? Is there anything I can do for you? If there's anything that I need. Now, she also said, look, he was a carny and we had to sue him for the money that he owed us. But, that's because he was not my husband's manager. Huh. He was my husband's promoter. And both of them, both Jerry and Priscilla, described Elvis in a term that I think you would probably use for a great artist like Picasso or maybe Eugene O'Neill or somebody. They said, you have to understand, the only thing that mattered to my husband was music, performing music. At 3 o'clock in the morning, if he wasn't in bed, he would be downstairs playing gospel on the piano in the living room. That's what he wanted to do. He could not say yes or no. He said, yes, sir, of course.
Yeah.
He took guidance. And if you take this reality, there's this old story. It's not in the movie, unfortunately. I wish it was, in which the colonel said to Elvis, son, right now you have $1 million worth of talent. When I'm done with you, you'll have $1 million. And that's true. From the signing with Colonel Tom Parker, in which he was essentially making a living by performing on around in small clubs and selling records out of the trunk of Sam Phillips's car. Yeah. He went from that to moving into the Graceland mansion, which he bought cash, within 18 months. So that's what Colonel Tom Parker did for Elvis. The genius of Colonel Tom Parker cannot be overstated, but it is all washed away, I think, from the great legacy of the late 60s and 70s in which the colonel was wrong. I'm not going to say, he never advised Elvis.
Yeah.
He never said, I think you should do music like this. I think you should perform like this. What he was is very possessive. He wasn't about to, let go of the great elephant attraction that he had. That's another long story I can tell about.
Yeah.
If you want to be the richest guy in the carnival, own an elephant, because everybody pays 25 cents to see the elephant. And they'll also pay another 10 cents for 2 cents worth of peanuts in order to feed the elephant. And that's what it was. But when Elvis wanted to make movies, it was a very good, sir. I'll get a deal and you'll make movies. And if you want to make some more records, I'll get a deal with you and make some more records. If you want to go on a big national tour, I'll make sure that you can go on a big national. If what you want is what you do. What happened is that both Jerry and Priscilla told me that he was respectful. He called him Mr. Presley. They had a very tight bond. What got in the way, which gets in the way of almost every business relationship, is time and money.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm telling tales out of school that said Elvis came back from the Army in the early 1960s with a penchant for uppers, amphetamines. They're sold across the counter there. And everybody in the Army used them in order to stay awake for maneuvers and what have you. And he kept up, and then along with it came, you have to be able to relax. So then there became that yin and yang of, taking something that made you feel good to taking something that made you go to sleep very, very well. Now, we don't, Elvis, you could probably look at the history of drug abuse in the 1960s, and Elvis would make just as much sense as anybody who was famously a heroin addict, Keith Richards and Elvis Presley, they were essentially looking for the same sort of escape that you're going to get from some degree of narcotics. The evil of Colonel Tom Parker, I think you're going to say that he signed that deal in Las Vegas, on one hand, was a brilliant deal because none of those shows cost Elvis Presley a dime.
Yeah.
The casinos paid for absolutely everything. But what was wrong about it, the Colonel got all of his gambling debts erased, and he got Elvis $5 million a year when he could have asked for $35 million a year. But there was no such things as $35 million a year. So at the end of the day, you have to say, what did Colonel Tom Parker do for Elvis? He made all of his dreams come true. At the same time, he turned him, I think, into the elephant chained up inside a tent that people paid 25 cents to see.
I'm sort of like just kind of gobsmacked.
That's the story. I didn't really talk about the character. I mean, that's the logic of what has to come out in the character. So when I'm talking about, I have to understand the logic of why these people do what they did. Colonel Tom Parker ran Elvis's career in a very specific kind of way. Why? It's because he knew he had Picasso. And in order to make Picasso more valuable, you have to make him less accessible. And so he took him off of TV. If you wanted to see Elvis Presley, there was only one way to do it. You wouldn't see him on the Steve Allen show after that one thing. You wouldn't see him on Tonight Show. You had to buy a ticket, you had to buy a record, or you had to listen to pay radio, in which they made money off of every time it played.
I wonder, though, I mean, your portrayal of Tom Parker, I mean, I'm sort of kind of gobsmacked that Priscilla Presley, was saying those things about him, because while your portrayal was certainly sympathetic and you walk away understanding that he was responsible for Elvis's stardom, you also or at least I walked away from your portrayal thinking that there are sociopathic tendencies in him, that he's a man who lacked empathy. He was,
I think that's where you get into the aspect of who's got the power here? I do, because you want my boy. And if you want my boy, you're going to have to give me exactly what I want. That's just the way it works.
Yeah.
I think the tragedy that hurt both of them was the Colonel's lack of imagination. Because 1968, Colonel Tom Parker's philosophy was you never bring politics to the carnival. We don't go there. We don't talk about that stuff. And what he did not understand was the great power that Elvis had. Because if Elvis had come out and just spoke lovingly about the state of Vietnam and the everything that was going on, he pounded into Elvis that no, you're just an entertainer, you're just an entertainer, you're just an entertainer. We must entertain. If you want to go into politics, run for office, and I'm not your manager anymore. And that was a mistake. He did not understand the great cultural place that Elvis had, because Elvis wanted, Elvis was hip when it came down to all this stuff. Elvis's influences were, rhythm and blues, black artists, and he gave jobs to all sorts of people of color in places where they would not have been able to have the opportunity were it not Elvis Presley say, no, I want them in the band. I want them as my background singers. I want them in the show. And that's where you get into the I think the easy way of saying that, well, the Colonel gave Elvis Presley a career, but he sort of ruined his life.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
even from Priscilla, it's like Elvis did not have a business bone in his body, but he could have said no. He could have said no.
Do you know what she thought of the film and your portrayal of Tom Parker?
I will tell you this, that there isn't anybody that portrays Elvis without going through some part of their the rights, the family, the estate. Yeah. And they've been burned many times. Because the myth of Elvis is the thing that carries the day. I don't want to put words in their mouth, but they were very pleased, and I think rightly so, because I think the great power of Baz's movie is it gets fascinating after the 1968 comeback special, because that's where the almost like Greek tragedy starts kicking in, and the fact that it ended. The myth is Elvis got fat, he did a lot of drugs, he gave lousy shows, and he shot a TV. That's pretty much it. He went nuts in a Las Vegas hotel room.
Yeah.
And he did do really bad shows, and he did get addled, and he was that
shoot TV.
Did shoot a TV, and he was affected by drugs, but we have that. It's in the movie, that last concert. That voice never left, and that power never left, even though he was bloated and he was tired, and they would have. And I think they were just happy. I don't want to speak for them. I think they were just happy that her husband and Lisa Marie's father was portrayed as an artist that struggled.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, as opposed to an example of sloth or greed or avarice.
Right.